Unit 15, Major Novelists and Their Works. Major writers of neoclassical age, including John Dryden, Alexander Pope, Jonathan Swift, Daniel Defoe, and Samuel Johnson, found inspiration in the classical period. Major characteristic of neoclassical period. Neoclassical architecture is characterized by grandeur of scale, simplicity of geometric form, Greek, especially Doric or Roman detail, dramatic use of column, and preference for blank walls. New taste for antique simplicity represented a general reaction to excess of the Rococo style. Characteristic of neoclassical literature. Neoclassical literature is characterized by order, accuracy, and structure in direct opposition to Renaissance attitude, where man was seen as an basically good. Neoclassical writer portrayed man as inherently flawed. They emphasize restraint, self control, and common sense. This was a time when conservatism flourished in both politics and literature. Some popular types of literature, including parody, parody essay, satire, letter, fables, melodrama, and rhyming with couplets. Three stages. At the beginning, neoclassical period of literature can be divided into three distinct stages. First, Restoration period. Second, Augustan period. And the third of Age of Johnson. We will take a look at some of the prominent writers in each of these stages. Features of Neoclassicism. Neoclassic authors manifested traditionalism and distrusted innovation in respect for classical writers. Art Poetica. Neoclassic ideal was craftsman's ideal. Literature should be an art which must be perfected by long study and practice. Neoclassic writers strove for correctness, observed decorum, and respected the rule of poetry established by classical works. Poet as a maker, Neoclassicalism pursued the art for humanity's sake. Its primary subject matter was human being as an integrated part of a society. In literature, poetry was held to be an imitation of human life, which is designed to give both instructions and pleasures to the people who read it. A prime aim of the poetry was to give a new and perfect expression to the general nature and share the value of humanity. Poetry needs to balance the typical and the familiar with a quality of novelty, particularity, and innovation. In Western literature, the pendulum of Western literature. Literature in the Western world can be thought of as swing back and forth between two artistic ideals. Classicism, which stresses following tradition and the rules derived thereof, and anti-classicism, rails romanticism, which stresses the originality and the tradition. The neoclassical period of 17th and 18th century was particularly strong classical period. It would in turn be followed by a particularly strong romantic period in the later 18th and 19th century. Aesthetics of identity versus aesthetic of opposition. This pendulum swing can also be taught in terms of the aesthetic of identity versus aesthetics of opposition. Aesthetic of identity says that we find beauty in the familiar. We like art that is like what we have seen before. Thus, classism is an aesthetic of identity. The aesthetics of opposition says that we find between the beauty and the nature in that which is new and different. That is the creed of romantic artists. Aesthetics of identity. Aesthetics is the study of beauty. In this case, beauty in literature. There are two conflicting views on aesthetics: aesthetic of identity and aesthetics of opposition. The aesthetic of identity is when we find the beauty in those works of art they are familiar to us, while aesthetics of opposition when we find beauty in new and different. By looking back to the ancient world of standards, neoclassical writers was working with the aesthetics of identity. Rule for arts. Neoclassicism writers believed that there were rules for all forms of arts. These rules were derived by looking at the text from the ancient world. For example, in France in 1635, Cardinal Richelieu established the Académie de François to establish the rules for the use of French language and to preserve the purity of language. The Academy is still a powerful organization in France. Importance of reason. The important human faculty was reason. Reason was the spark of the divine with the human beings. The path to know knowledge and the virtue was through the exercise of reason. For example, one of the important religious movement of neoclassical age was the Deist movement. Deism is a completely rational form of Christianity. Thank you.